I don't know if it's a problem, but just.
Okay. So this is a series of AI generated videos that are generated directly through text prompts. And this is built off of the OpenAI platform that powers ChatGPT. So you'll see the prompt in a quick sentence, and this is the video it's able to produce, studio quality, right? And it takes probably a couple of seconds to produce videos like these. You can prompt it for almost anything. Whatever idea you have, it's going to be able to generate it. You're going to see some people in here. They are all fake. None of them are actors. None of them are actually people in front of a camera. This is all generated by software. And I think this was launched less than 2 months ago, right? So the capabilities of AI continue to grow and expand. And what we're experiencing now with AI is this benevolent spiral where a technology is introduced, people start to use it, try to break it, and the AI gets stronger as it goes. And so one of the important things to realize about all technologies is that we are living through this, what I like to call this reverse telescope of technology. If you think about how long it took between the time, radio was the most kind of relevant multimedia people had in their homes to television, then from television to computers, then from computers to the cloud, those windows are shrinking, right? So where AI will be in 2 months is significantly different, exponentially different than where it is today. Let me switch here. So some things that we're going to discuss today, and I think, we're going to end with some live practice. We're going to discuss AI and why it's important to have this conversation, particularly, as workforce stakeholders, as businesses, as service providers, as education providers. We're going to talk about the broader implications of AI on the workforce and how we can approach thinking about AI and the implementation. I think in the description of the session, we talked about how to drive innovation here. And so I'm going to give you some tools for thought of where we can start. I'm going to try to keep this conversation as accessible as possible. I'm going to stay away from any technical terms or jargon. But again, if I get too technical, feel free to flag me. I will walk it back so that everybody can understand. The next piece we're going to do is we're going to discuss some AI tools. And there's a lot there, but I'm going to give you guys some real world examples. And then we're going to do some live practice. So with respect to the live practice, for my friends that are joining on Zoom, feel free to pull up any of the tools that I'm going to be discussing today and do some of the practice examples with us, right? You can contextualize it to whatever you're most interested in. And to my friends in the room, I'm going to actually ask you guys to be on your phones while we're presenting. So you guys can also do this live practice with us. I will not get offended, I promise. Okay? So let's talk quickly about what do we think about when we think about the words AI. So what I'm going to ask you to do, my friends in the room, if you can take out your phones, I want you to send a text message to the phone number 22333. And to join the poll, you're just going to text the word Grant Associates, all one word, to that number, and it's going to invite you to the poll. For my friends online, you can follow the same instructions. You can just go to that link up at the top, or you can also text on your phone if that's more comfortable to you, or use the QR code if that's easier. Okay? So the question is, when you think of the term AI, what words come to mind? Future, okay. Matrix, I like it. Scary, that's a common one. And this is a word cloud, so as words come up more frequently, we're going to see those words have more prominence. Chatbot, okay, futuristic. Robots, fascinating. Confusing, all right, hopefully today will help with that a little bit. Opportunity. Inconsistencies, intelligent. Deceptive, okay. Discovery. Learning, advancement, fake. It's interesting that future and scary are the most common words, right? Fast, inclusive, unique, innovation, new, threatening, deep learning. Yeah, so you guys can continue to add for my friends online if you haven't had a chance to add your thoughts here. But this is how generally people feel about AI. And what we tend to see is there are kind of two camps with AI. There are the doomers who feel, again, robots are coming for our jobs, right? This is going to be the end of humanity. We're approaching the singularity. And then there are other people who are really excited about what AI can actually do for us, right? And the opportunities that it presents. And then there are people in the middle who are unsure, right? A little bit agnostic. And so, a recent study was conducted of employees at different companies, and almost 90% of those employees felt that AI was going to have significant impact on their work. But only 10% felt that their employers would help them navigate what that meant. Right. And so there is a little bit of anxiety around what this actually means. And what that study also found is that 2/3 of individuals felt confident about the opportunities presented with AI if they had had any exposure to it before. Right. And so I think one of our responsibilities as stakeholders here is to really be kind of at the forefront of exposing individuals to what AI actually is and what it isn't. Okay. And so I'm going to keep going here. So again, Grant Associates, our mission is to raise the economic security of people, businesses, and communities we serve, which kind of is the impetus for why we're having discussions like this. And let's talk a little bit about why discussing AI. One is that it can be helpful, right? And I think more importantly than that, the more we know about it, the more hopeful we are about that, optimistic future, right? The less we know about it, the more likely we are to have anxiety about it. And I think what we want to do is dispel some of that anxiety and some of the myths related to AI, right? The other reason is, and this is probably kind of mislabeled, it's not the AI is coming. It's already here. It's been here, right? I don't know if you guys have noticed when you're texting on your phone at the bottom of the text message, it'll show you what words are probably coming up next. That's not a new feature. It's been around for a long time. That's built on the same premise as ChatGPT. It's predicting what you're likely to say based on previous conversations, right? If you've had, I don't know, if you've been on Netflix or Hulu and it's suggesting shows you might like, it's learning about your style and things that you've seen before and making those suggestions, right? How many of us here, just quick show of hands, have either a Google device or an Alexa in our homes? It's already here. It's been here, right? I think what we're seeing is really this kind of propulsion of AI into the future, but it is already here. And so we really have to start to contend with it and what it might mean for us. My 4-year-old is constantly asking Alexa questions. And so I have to, as a parent, be aware of what this tool can do for the generation that's coming, right? So I think also, this is an important quote here, and this was done from an IBM study. It's not that AI is going to replace workers, but more that workers that use AI will replace those that don't. Okay. And again, when we think about the employment prospects, about between 80 and 85% of jobs are going to have some type of impact from AI directly. Probably about 20% of jobs, about 50% of the tasks we're going to be displaced by AI. But that impact is not linear, right? It's disproportionate in different industries. It's disproportionate by different types of employees and job seekers, right? So what is anticipated to happen is over the next probably 10 years, many of the roles that are relevant to individuals who, don't have any higher level credentials or degrees will have some impact by AI. These roles are generally things like the retail industry, the hospitality industry. I don't know if you guys have heard, Wendy's has started to use AI to take orders from the drive-through because it can do that and do it relatively accurately, right? And so those workers who were previously manning the drive-through now have to do other things. And so one of the things that we're going to discuss as we go through this conversation is how we can think about jobs and skills to make them more resilient in this kind of new technological landscape, okay? So what is AI? I think this is an important place to start. AI is not actually an intelligence. It is designed to mimic human interaction, but it is essentially programming, right? It's ones and zeros, and it's following a very specific set of rules, policies, and guidance, right? So it may feel human, but it is not actually an intelligence. And again, it's been here for a long time. Computer-based chess has been around for a long time. It's, again, reading your moves and playing them back to you. I mentioned our streaming options, your Google. That's my YouTube window. Okay, here we go. Even the YouTube ad suggestions are also generated by artificial intelligence. So it probably heard what we were saying and presented those ads. So, and again, identity theft detection, AI is looking at your bank transactions and looking for things that are unusual and flagging those immediately. It's not a person sitting there watching every single card swipe that you have. That's again focused on what AI is not, right? It is not how. It is not, androids and computers that are sentient, that are acting on their own. It is really impressive, but it is still very much human-led. It is not, the T-1000 coming from Terminator. It is largely following a very specific set of instructions, like I mentioned before. It's algorithmic thinking. Even these large language models like ChatGPT, all it's really doing is using a really large language base, a huge database. It's looking at the words that you've given it and predicting mathematically what are the most likely words to come next. It's not actually thinking. It's just doing the math. This is 80% likely to be accurate, which also leads AI to have, hallucinations, right? They also call them artifacts. They're things that just don't make any sense. That's that, 22% that, is wrong. And so very much it's still human-led, right? A lot of the responses, a lot of the content that you get has to be vetted. And early on with ChatGPT, it would ask you, was this good, right? Did I give you what you were looking for? And it's learning. It gets sharper with that human interaction. And like I mentioned, that benevolent cycle, the more that we engage with it, the better it gets, right? But it is not perfect by any means. We were discussing earlier, I don't know if you guys have had the chance to play around with image generation. You might ask it to generate a picture and it'll show you a person with 15 fingers, right? Images are really tough for AI because it's not actually seeing anything, right? It's doing its interpretation of what a hand means. But that still needs to be vetted and qualified by a person to tell it whether it's right or wrong. Now, what AI is, let's see if I can get this up on the screen, because this is particularly cool. So that is a robot designed by Boston Dynamics. This is probably their 2000th iteration of that robot. The first version of it could not stand up and walk 2 steps. Now it's doing flips and half gainers, right? So again, it's not thinking. It's following a very specific set of instructions that were pre-programmed, right? And so when we think about AI, I want to frame it in this broader context of automation in general. and basically how machines can assist the work that we do, right? And AI is a component of that that's probably taking more prevalence just because of its pervasiveness. But here. Common uses of AI, and this list has changed slightly, but not too much. So, pre-ChatGPT, we had Deep Blue, which is IBM's thinking computer, and this is not new. This is, at this point, over a decade old. And I believe Deep Blue was one of the first machines to beat the chess grandmasters, right? I think Kasparov was able to beat it one time, but the machine learned, and it wasn't able to be beaten after that. Facial and voice recognition, social media. You guys have seen those AI image generators where you upload a picture and it makes you look like a king or whatever it is. So there's a lot of people having fun with it. Grammar editing, autonomous vehicles, and this is a really interesting one when we think about the landscape of work. Driving is still a huge occupation across multiple sectors. And so what does, self-driving vehicles actually mean for us and the world of work? Data analysis, chatbots, deep fakes, they're actually getting better and better, those deep fakes with voice replication and image replication. What we're doing with it now is a lot of fun. I think people are starting to explore use cases for how it can make their lives easier. I was mentioning earlier, I use ChatGPT often for meal planning, just because I don't want to spend the mental load of thinking about what I'm going to make for dinner for a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old every day. Let it do that, right? And language processing is huge. And we were mentioning earlier, translation is getting stronger and stronger. I think right now, ChatGPT can translate into like over 100 languages, probably closer to 150. And the translations are pretty accurate. In the near future, again, better versions of that previous list. True virtual assistants, the more access they have to the data that we're giving it, the more they're learning us and our style, the more effective they're going to be at actually helping us specifically. Robotic assistants, like I showed you, that Boston Dynamic model is not for public consumption, but we'll get there eventually. AI teachers and trainers. And for those of us in the education space, we were talking about this earlier too. ChatGPT in the classroom, how does it impact how we teach, what skills are valued, and what we expect back from our students is an important thing for us to consider because it's already here. And then what else is kind of hard to predict, right? I think as it gets stronger, the possibilities start to increase, and it's hard to tell where it might go. Some common AI tools, and here are some logos. Anybody in this room think that they can name all of these AI tools? No? Okay. What about, can anybody name 4 of them? Okay, 3? Anybody got 3? 2? Okay, well, I am talking to the right group, okay? So we're going to talk about some of these tools. I'm going to mention a bunch of them, kind of what the use case is for all of them. That first logo up at the top left is ChatGPT, right? You're going to see that more and more often. In the middle is Watson. It's IBM's Watson, famous for playing Jeopardy, very good at Jeopardy. Here we have Copilot. So, and Microsoft has gone through a couple of iterations for how they're deploying AI. Copilot, and I'll talk about this in a second, is built off of the ChatGPT framework. But Microsoft has some competitive advantages that make it a little bit more relevant to some of us. We have this one on the bottom corner. That's Claude 3. Claude is kind of the next up-and-coming competitor to ChatGPT, right? It does some things better than ChatGPT does. And what we're seeing now is kind of an arms race on artificial intelligence. Every kind of model that adds a new feature, its competitors start to add that feature. And so Claude is coming up behind Copilot, and this one in the middle is Google Gemini. Gemini used to be Bard. This is the Gemini logo. And then here we have Salesforce's Einstein. Einstein was probably the first out of the pack for public consumption, right? And it was built off of the kind of Salesforce platform to do special things with your data. And I'll talk a little bit more about what it can do for us later. But really the most popular ones are ChatGPT, Copilot, and Google Gemini. So question for the group, and you can use the same poll. Feel free to use your phones. Feel free to chime in on the poll online. How many of these tools have you used? Okay, about half of us haven't used any of them. Okay, great. We're gonna have some fun today. Okay, some people have used 3. Nice. Okay, so it looks like almost half haven't used any AI tools. And I think if you walk away from this conversation with anything, is that we have to engage with them in some way, shape, or form. Imagine if it was, I don't know, 20 years ago, and you've never used a computer before, right? Where would you be today? It's the same type of transition, right? This is going to become more prevalent. It is going to be the way we access information in the future. And so in order to get comfortable with it, we have to engage with it, right? You can't break it. Most of these, actually all of them, except for Einstein, have free versions that you can just play with, right? And just see what comes back. So there's very little risk with being able to use some of these tools. So let's talk a little bit about kind of some common questions around AI before I talk about the tools in a second. And the first is, which tasks and skills are going to be most important for human workers to thrive? There are a couple of different ways to consider this question. What I would say is, AI literacy is going to be really important. And it's not necessarily using or mastering any specific AI software or platform, but understanding how to engage with them, what they can be used for, right? The challenging thing with AI, like I mentioned before, is that it's changing very quickly and constantly. So developing a deep mastery of one version of it may not be relevant in 4 weeks or 6 weeks, but knowing how to understand AI, where to learn about AI is probably a more valuable skill set. So you can keep abreast of what those changes are and what they might mean for you, right? I think the other thing, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this in terms of how we approach skills, and I'll touch on this on this last question. How can leaders across kind of workforce and education continuum begin to reshape jobs? The key concept to consider is this concept of uniquely human skills, okay? And AI has really challenged which skills we can consider to be uniquely human, right? Answering a question or gathering data may not be a uniquely human skill anymore. But what our responsibility is to kind of highlight, elevate those skills that are uniquely human, and to think about our jobs and their tasks to figure out which skills are uniquely human that we can capitalize on with AI, that we can elevate in that role. So really thinking about job crafting. And then also, what are the tasks or skills that aren't as important, that are really time intensive, that are really labor intensive, that we can lean towards automation to relieve, right? I think that's kind of the biggest area of opportunity. Now, when we talk about how these technology implications impact workers, like I mentioned before, the implication is different for different industries, and also in those industries, it's not equally distributed, right? So the projections are that some entry-level jobs, like I mentioned, in retail and hospitality, jobs that are largely routine, right, and repetitive tasks are generally going to be displaced by AI and automation. And those roles tend to impact women more significantly than men. So almost 6 million women are going to have some type of significant impact through AI, where men, it's closer to 4 million, right? And again, it's going to be those groups that are, don't have advanced degrees, don't have specializations in industry certifications. That's the group that's going to be most vulnerable here, right? So as we pay attention to that, I think that's one of the things that we want to consider is what does it mean for their jobs, and how we're retraining that workforce, reskilling that workforce, and reimagining what their jobs look like, right? So thinking about that reimagining, I want to present this framework, and I want to cite a source that after this meeting, I'll make sure that we send out in links. So this comes from Jobs for the Future, which is a workforce think tank. They have an AI lab where they're constantly exploring and researching the implications of AI in the workforce, right? And so they presented this as part of their AI blueprint for workforce intermediaries and how we think about jobs, right? So Here, the axis is, let me move my stuff down. So these two axes are human supported or human led, or machine supported and machine led across the bottom, right? Now, I'm going to start with the top. What we want to elevate in terms of skill sets are the skills that we identify to be uniquely human skills, right? Does anybody in this room have an example of what might be considered a uniquely human skill? A therapist? Okay, that's one. Things that are relational and based on our understanding of people, I would consider to be uniquely human. Think about the ability to motivate a team, right? AI is going to have a really difficult time doing that. There's a lot of nuance there, and presence is really important. Any other examples of uniquely human skills? Childcare, right? A uniquely human skill. Exactly. And so when we think about uniquely human skills, it's the ones where the human touch matters more, right? And the ones that kind of outpace what AI can do for us right now, right? So, complex cognitive tasks, really difficult for AI to do well, right? And I think part of the reason for that is that AI is designed to be broadly applicable, but not super deep, right? Like a mile wide and an inch deep, think about it, right? Because it's meant to accommodate every single type of use case. The deeper you have to get into a decision, into analytics, the more that's going to rely on people, right? And so when we think about roles, the thing to consider is, again, can we augment that level of complex cognitive skill with what tools AI provides for us, right? Instead of me taking the time to digest and analyze a spreadsheet, have AI do it for me, and then I can think about the implications, right? What it actually means for me. Again, relationship building, right? AI is going to be really powerful, already is with sales, because sales often is based on relationships, right? What I know about my customer, can I anticipate their needs, right? Do they feel like they're my only customer? AI can empower that by remembering our previous conversations, the tone of those conversations, what's important to that individual. So I don't have to spend my mental bandwidth doing that, right? Where AI and technology will complement skill sets are the roles and tasks that are already kind of machine collaborative, right? If you're already working deeply with computers, with machines, you're just going to get better at that because the skill set already exists to, again, advance your skill set, right? To learn a new programming language, to think deeply about systems thinking. AI is really going to complement those skills, but it won't displace them. They're not going to see as much of a disruption. And then the skills that we will displace, one, routine cognitive tasks. And, chatbots are, I had to contact an airline, and the first thing the chatbot asked me is like, how can I help you? It's designed to answer common customer questions. Why have a human do that if all I need to do is change my reservation, right? Or have an email resent to me. And so those routine cognitive tasks are going to be displaced, and then replaced, and this is coming soon, are those routine physical tasks, things that are really repetitive and labor intensive. Those machines that are being built, that Boston Dynamic machine is really designed to do that for us, right? To get rid of things like someone that's moving boxes in a warehouse, right? Or lifting, bags of cement, machines can probably do that. Now, when we think about what does this mean for the skill sets that we're preparing workers with, there's basically 4 tactics that you can take, right? And some of these, converge together a little bit. The beginning is start to future-proof some of those roles, right? Looking at the roles that we know are going to have a big disruption through AI, and what are the skills we can elevate, and what are the skills that we can eliminate, right? And again, as we're elevating those skills and some of that is building the technical acumen of those employees, getting them ready, right? So getting them ready now and getting them ready for the future. Capitalizing on use cases that make people better at their jobs through the use of AI, right? I gave the sales example. I think that's a great one to think about. Automate. The tasks that are less important, have a computer do it, right? I think I'll give you an example. We had a program where every week my staff was getting a list of 500 customers that they had to contact on the phone, right? And so what the team was doing originally was just working through that list one by one, right? It took a lot of time. didn't really produce that much value. Sometimes the phone numbers didn't work. Sometimes people weren't home, but they were just going through that task, spending a good chunk of their week doing it. What we decided to do was, well, let's automate that process a little bit. Let's have, you can do things like computer integrated telephony, where it'll just dial people and only connect to a human when someone picks up on the other end. So even the activity of dialing 200 calls, I don't have to do that. I can save my time for the person I'm talking to. The other thing that we did in terms of automation is we asked for a call to action from that 500 customer list. So the customers who responded to us first got the staff's attention first, because those customers were already engaged. So it was a way for us to prioritize the list and give that person much more, effective customer service, rather than having them wait for our team to be there and get them on the phone, right? So when we think about, and again, I want to talk about automation just a little bit more deeply, a way that you can think about what roles or what tasks are prime for automation, and this is real simple. Think about a task, a job, right? Someone's job, and have them list all of the things that they do on a given day, in a given week, in a month, in a quarter, right? Right next to those tasks, identify how important is that task to the organization, to their role, right? Right next to that priority, identify how much time it takes, right? Does it take 50% of your week to do a task that's, the last to importance? Those tasks where you see incongruence with the staff's time and the importance of the role, look to automate. There's a better way to do it. It's going to make the team's lives easier. And also, it's going to build their capacity to do things that actually demand more of their cognitive ability, their attention. Those are the things that actually workers are really happy about, because that part of their task that is not important, that's taking all their time, is a pain. So get rid of the pain and you're going to get a much more highly engaged workforce. And it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And for all of the things that we discussed today, when we talk about use cases, don't start with the tool, right? If you try to start with the tool and force it into the organization, the implementation will not work. Start with the organizational need, right? How does it make people's lives better? And then find the tool that will help you do that. And it might not be one of these tools. It might be something else that you need to explore, but that's where we begin the conversation of automation. So, I think the concept of AI, just because it's new and novel, may not work because it doesn't make sense for your organization or its employees, okay? And then lastly, reimagining roles. There's this element, and I've been talking about this, job crafting, right? Think about, again, how do we elevate some of those uniquely human skills and get rid of the skills that are less important to the organization, or the skills that are more likely to be displaced by AI. And that can coincide with future proofing, right? So I'm going to give you guys a couple of examples, right? So in the hospitality industry, things to future proof or reimagine, upskilling the teams that handle routine tasks like data entry, right? Automation can do that for us readily, and have them focus on things like addressing complex customer problems, right? And I gave this example when I did this presentation before. How many of you guys call a customer service line and you get the automated voice on the end? What's the first thing you do when you hear that automated voice? Right? Representative. It's the first thing I want to talk to a person to handle my complex problem, right? So, and that's what we should have our staff really doing, right? Not answering these kind of questions. When I was younger, I used to work doing technical support for Sony. And the first question, no matter what the problem was, the first question they always had us ask, what do you guys think it was? Are you a human? No, not even then. It was all people. What do you think is the first thing they trained us to ask? Is it plugged in? Is it plugged in? That solved 85% of the problems. But yet that's the first question I, as a person, have to spend my time answering, instead of the person that had a real issue that only I could address. So again, de-emphasize the things that automation can manage for us. Don't have your team spending time doing that, right? Again, when we talk about capitalizing, like I mentioned, what are the roles where AI can really elevate the skill and make people more effective at what they're doing, right? That's where you're really going to see huge increases in value add, and automate the easy things, right? The things that are time intensive, but not super valuable. That's what we want to think about when we think about kind of the hospitality industry, right? Now, another industry example, healthcare. Repetitive tasks like tracking and reporting, checking vital signs are going to be increasingly more automated, right? And so what we want to do is elevate, again, those skills that are human specific, patient care, right? That bedside manner, right? The things that are people really value the human experience for, right? And again, capitalizing on an AI-enabled process to establish better relationships with our customers, right? With their service providers, and automating physical tasks, right? Even physical tasks around patient care. So, I think in the healthcare industry, you have a lot of direct care professionals, direct care providers. Those roles are really physically taxing, right? They wear you down. There's a high rate of injury. Is there a way that machines can assist that to reduce the burnout on staff, right? So those are things that we want to think about in those industries. And then logistics, right? So AI driven, from route optimization, like all of these things are even relevant now, right? So what skill sets are going to be more in demand for how workers collaborate with machines, right? And so, even in logistics, I was talking about automated autonomous vehicles. You don't have full self-driving vehicles yet because there's a lot of data for a machine to have to interpret that we need humans to be able to do. So I think there's this vision of having huge fleets that are just going across the country on their own. It's hard to do that because AI would be forced to make decisions that are really difficult for it to manage, right? And so the nature, maybe the driver is not necessarily having his hand on the wheel at 10 and 2, but they're managing a fleet, right? So maybe that driver is managing a convoy of 3 tractors that are following each other, but it's still human-led in that first one, right? Reimagining interpersonal skills, especially customer-facing and managerial roles. Like I mentioned, we noticed that uniquely human skill of managing teams. AI will not do that for us. So can we further emphasize that and sharpen that skill set? And then again, automating routine physical tasks, right? Like warehousing. I don't know if you guys have seen, Amazon has already started to explore using robots in their warehouses because the warehouses are huge, right? They're running 24 hours a day. Is that a better solution? And then maybe what you have is people managing those machines, right? So it is designed to increase the capacity, but that's the way we want to think about these roles, right? Emphasizing the uniquely human roles and automating the ones that machines can manage for us. So now, the fun part, let's talk about the tools. We're going to do live practice. Again, feel free to take your phones out and do this with me. And towards the end, I'm going to ask for a brave volunteer. So I'm going to give you guys a heads up now. So here's a side-by-side comparison of some of the AI tools that we're going to be exploring today, okay? We have Google Gemini, we've got Copilot, we've got ChatGPT. Each one of them has iterations. I'm not going to go into it. You have ChatGPT 3.5, GPT-4, GPT-4 Turbo, Google Ultra, Google Nano. We'll keep it real broad. All right. So we have Gemini, Copilot, and ChatGPT. All of them have their competitive advantages, right? So the first, I'll start with Google. Google is one of the ones that was developed largely independently, right? So Google kind of used their database of search engine queries to build their GPT model, right? They also, they're the biggest search engine. So there's a lot of data that they're able to digest. And they were able to be kind of the first out of the gate to be more real time, right? Because it's built on the back end of a search engine. Google also, their Gemini model, and again, I'm not going to get too technical. There's what's called a context window, which means how much information you can give a GPT program in one chat. Google has the ability, or at least they're promoting the ability, to have the largest context window, right? They can probably take in at max capacity, a couple of hundreds of thousands of words, right? For comparison, ChatGPT and Copilot are probably limited at their max capacity to like 60,000 words, right? Copilot, which is the Microsoft iteration, their competitive advantage is the pervasiveness of the Microsoft platform, right? I'm sure most of us are using Windows computers. Copilot is being built into Windows. It's already in Windows 11. If you're in Windows 11, you'll see a little Copilot preview on the corner. You can access it right there from your desktop. So they have the advantage of already being in people's homes. Copilot is also designed to integrate directly with Microsoft suite of programs, right? Excel, Word, PowerPoint, it's built in to work with those things. Google Gemini can also integrate with the Google suite. So Google Sheets has a little Gemini button that you can use on the top. But Microsoft, again, they cover such a big swath of the PC market that they're able to capitalize on that advantage. And ChatGPT is kind of it's the framework that Microsoft Copilot was built on. So, and what I mentioned before is what you're seeing now is a large convergence of the functionality. A lot of what you can do with GPT, you can do in Copilot, right? A lot of what you're seeing in GPT and Copilot, you can see in Gemini. So as soon as somebody releases a function, everybody else is racing to see how they can integrate it too. All of these systems are what's known as multimodal, which means that they can output images, audio, code. They can take in input from text, from pictures. GPT, Copilot, and Gemini, they're all web enabled. Before they weren't. So the free version of GPT only had data available to about September 2021, right? The GPT-4 can now web search, right? So you can give it a link, you could have it fact check, it's connected to the web. So it makes the data a little bit more real time. And all of them have a cost price, like a pricing model, right? So Copilot Pro, I believe is $20 per user. GPT is about $20 per user, not super expensive. And each one of them also has an enterprise iteration, right? So you can adopt it for your business, okay? And so we'll talk a little bit now about live examples, and we're gonna do this live, right? So here are some ways that AI can support your business. The first is to help identify potential business partners or opportunities. And so you guys can do this with me live, and we are going to do it live. I'm going to hop over to an internet browser, and we're going to plug in some of these prompts directly. You guys can do it too. Feel free to pull out your phone. If you just Google Gemini, you'll pull it up, and I'll show you what it looks like when we go live, right? So this first one, we're going to do in Gemini. So let me pop over here. Okay. And this is my Gemini dashboard. And I'm going to show you guys a couple of things for each of them. But essentially, you're going to enter your prompt here. And I have some prompts already preset. So I'm just going to copy them over. So my first prompt is going to be, what industries in Columbia County, New York typically see the most hiring in the fall? Right. I'm just copying and pasting so I don't have to type. And we'll paste my prompt. It's thinking. Okay, here's a breakdown of the industries that generally experience hiring in the fall. Education, K through 12. Let's scroll a little bit. Retail for the holiday season. Hospitality for agritourism and fall festivals. Healthcare due to seasonal illness and senior care. It's also telling me how to find jobs. And again, I can tell it whether I like this response or not. Right? Here's another example. I'm going to do, what's a common concern among manufacturers in Greene County, New York? Like I said, you guys can do this with me. I'm going to paste this right in. Here's a breakdown of common concerns. Labor shortages. Supply chain disruptions. Rising costs. Regulatory concerns. Environmental regulations. Tax policies. Operational challenges. Outdated technology. Cybersecurity. Right? Workforce development needs. Where's the skills gap? Where to find more information. Right? Yes.
Yeah, the site source look like on something like this?
I can ask it to cite its sources.
To just sort of like, they hit like 4 places, you know?
It's going to give you probably the 4 most common, right? And it'll give you links, right? So let me see if this one will do it for us. Yeah, so I can ask it to cite its sources and it'll say from these places, right? Some of them are better at citing sources than others. So Google Gemini is pretty good. And also Copilot is pretty good because of the Bing search engine, right? So it'll tell you this is where I got the data from. Okay. GPT, at least the previous iterations that weren't web enabled weren't as great about, right? About citing the specific source, but you can ask it to cite its sources.
Provide a link, I assume.
Yeah, it'll provide a link and let you kick out to see what that source is. How is it different than Google? That's a good question.
I was thinking, this is a super search, right?
It is kind of a super search. And honestly, what they're really adept at is trying to give you the most relevant response based on your prompt, right? So one of the things about Google is that people can play around with search engine optimization. So based on what you said, like if I'm a website, I can have certain keywords in my metadata that's going to put me to the top. Doesn't mean I'm what you need, right? And so what this is doing is it's trying to be more relevant to your query. And also it's asking you if, did I get it right? Right? What Google search don't generally do is kind of have you vet the quality of the response when you do a Google search. And it's going to give you, based on that, search engine optimization, what it thinks is best. Here it's trying to do some qualification, right? Trying to get you something that's more relevant.
Question chat, how accurate or trustworthy is information generated by?
Take everything with a grain of salt. That's one of the things that I advise everyone. Like I mentioned before, there are what you call hallucinations and artifacts where it doesn't give you something that's exactly accurate, right? And like I said, it's not thinking. What it's doing is predicting what is the most likely words that come next, right? And so it could be wrong, right? You always want to take this with a grain of salt, which is a great question to ask. Where did you get this information from, right? Because you want to, again, be questionable about where the sources are. But generally you find probably like 80% of the time it's pretty good. Gemini, they're very comparable to each other in terms of their accuracy. Gemini is slightly ahead of ChatGPT, not, half a percentage point difference when they did an evaluation of common queries. Okay. And again, give it the thumbs up and thumbs down. The other thing that you're going to find is when we do these prompts, and we'll talk a little bit about prompt engineering, you want to give it as much context as possible in your prompt. Let it know who you are and why you want that information. And it's going to be more specific to your response, right? I'm a sales manager for an advanced manufacturing company. I want to know, what are the biggest issues with manufacturers in this area? It's going to give you more specific responses, the more context you give it. Yes. No worries.
What if you ask the same question to the 4 different entry points? Would you get the same answer? Would you just be
Yes. So the question was, what if you put the same prompt into the different GPT models? Will you get the same answer? You won't get exactly the same answer, right? They're probably going to be comparable, but they're not built exactly the same. I think probably Copilot and GPT will be the closest because Copilot is built off of the GPT framework. Google built their own kind of model separately. It is likely going to be pretty close, but things that you're going to notice is a difference in tone, right? So GPT was really designed to be much more conversational in its style. It kind of feels a little bit warmer, almost like you're talking to a person. Gemini is getting closer to that, but it was much more kind of technical and scholarly in its tone. So it'll feel a little bit different, but you can also adjust that in your prompt, right? I want you to respond in this way, right? So you can cater it to kind of what your needs are. Okay, but it's a good thing to play around with. I would suggest put the same prompt into all 3 and see which one gives you the response that you like best. I think it's one which it's really whichever you like the most, right? Like they're going to be really close, but you might like some responses better. I think also ChatGPT, because it was built to be more conversational, is better at understanding things like idioms and sarcasm, right? This is not a person, right? So it understanding your tone is one of the challenges that these systems have. I think ChatGPT, partly because it was used so widely, is a little bit better at understanding common language, but they're very comparable, right? I don't think that there's one that's like significantly outpaces the others. I think if Gemini had the advantage is this larger context window, right? You can put more information in and it can remember more in a single chat. Okay. So that's one example. And like I said, I feel free to test your own examples, give it your own prompts. I'm going to give you guys another example. Let me go back here. Here's one of my favorite ones. How many of us, someone made a joke to me a while ago. It feels like, we went to college to become professional emailers. How many of you guys spent a long time crafting and recrafting an email that you need to send out to get it exactly right? It takes you way longer than it should. One of the things that generative AI is able to do for us is it does really good at generating content, text content, right? And like I said, you take those with a grain of salt. You always want to give it a little bit more context. But instead of spending your time trying to think about what you want to say in an email, throw it in ChatGPT and edit the response that comes back, right? It'll take you a third of the time. So here's one. We're going to do this in Copilot. So I'm going to go to my copy text. And I'm just going to give it this really simple prompt. And I want to give you the difference when we add more context to the prompt. Okay. So let me go back. I'm going to switch from Gemini to Copilot. And here again, similar layout, right? You got the prompt window on the bottom. It'll give you some recommendations. It's a similar layout here. I'm just going to put my prompt in here. And now it's giving me an introductory email template to a business. Right? And if I like it, I like it. It's giving me, again, sources, learn more, right? Where is it pulling these templates from? So I can click into them and get more information about it. So this was one example, and I'm just going to quickly show you guys what it said to us. Let's see.
But again, like the other, like the more information you put in there, it's almost gonna customize, like, that's a template, right?
Yes.
Like, you put in there, I am a sales manager for XYZ company that sells widgets.
You're going to see, that's my next prompt. So here, you're right there with me, right? So here, my name is Richard and I represent company XYZ. We specialize in X. Our team is passionate about Y. I wanted to reach out to introduce ourselves and recently share this information with you. Real simple, right? Now, to your point, let's give it a stronger prompt. So now my prompt is going to say, I'm a sales account manager at Workforce Solutions, and I want to share a no-cost staffing service with Kenmore Trucking. Please draft an introductory email. Okay, so I'm going to pop back in here. And now I'm just going to add this prompt. Now look what it's doing. There you go. It gives me much more specific context. And you want to see, let's see. I just asked it to translate that to Spanish. Come on, ChatGPT. There we go. There we go. The translation is pretty good.
How accurate is that translation?
It's pretty good.
Pretty good, like
How do you know?
spot on? Like,
If
Like,
Reading
how do I
this-
know if I'm not a Spanish speaker, that's the accurate information.
What I would do is have a Spanish speaker read it. In my experience, I've never had to change the translation. I don't speak conversational Russian or Creole or anything like that. Spanish works. Right? So, again, I was having a conversation about accessibility to services, right? And we talk about some of these GPT features. Your phone, I don't know how many people have an Android phone. I have an Android phone. I just got a new one. You can add Gemini as an assistant and it'll do real-time translation. 2 ways. So I could have somebody speaking Creole to me and I'm speaking English and it'll translate both ends of the conversation in real time. Right? So again, accessibility, I think, is a huge advantage. The translation features work pretty well. And I think it can do close to 150 languages at this point. Okay. Now, let me give you another example. Like I said, this is the fun part, right? All right, so let's go to the next. Analyzing and summarizing vast amounts of data to find interesting results and patterns. I'm going to give you an example of this, but I wanted to talk a little bit about what AI can do for us with respect to data in our organizations. What I find is that people are the most excited about this, right? But there's something that we want to consider before we, go 100% full tilt at implementing AI to analyze our enterprise data, okay? And some examples that we have here, Google Clouds, Einstein, Watson Analytics, they've designed some of these enterprise AI systems to be very specific to the use case. So you can have solutions that are designed specifically for your organization. But the thing that you want to consider before you kind of think about what AI can do in terms of analyzing your company's data are 2 things. One is what's your organization's approach to data administration, right? And then how does that define your company's level of data sophistication, right? And where AI can take us. So I want to just share this framework with you. And this actually comes from the Harvard Business Review, and just wanted to talk a few stages of data sophistication was my scale at the bottom. Many organizations are stage 1 in data sophistication, which is collecting and cleaning, right? So what we do a lot is we collect a lot of data in, and we spend a lot of time cleaning that data and making sure it's accurate, right? And I know you guys have heard the statement, garbage in, garbage out, right? If the data is not clean, AI is not going to be able to fix that problem for you, right? And so to move to stage 2, you want to make sure that your data is accurate, that you're collecting the right data. And many organizations are already in stage 2, where we're using that data, historic data, to establish KPIs and to alert us when things are not going well. Where AI really adds value is stage 3, where it's making predictive analytics and prescription of next steps to take, right? And so I'll give you a great example. I talked about Salesforce Einstein. So Salesforce is a CRM platform largely used for sales. One of the first examples that was presented when Einstein came out was it was able to look at sales conversion data and map that to publicly available information to tell you when a sale was most likely to convert and when your sales reps should be calling specific clients, right? And so, for example, it would read National Weather Service data and say, this client purchases this product 70% of the time after it rains. So that's when to call, right? And it would set up those tasks for you because it was, again, looking at that history and comparing it to previously existing data. That's something that, one, you wouldn't automatically think of, but it's able to digest that data, vast amounts of data, and be able to give you a suggestion. Now, the thing about AI is that it's very good at correlation. It cannot do causation, right? So what it'll tell you is these 2 things tend to happen together. I don't know why it does. I don't know why that happens, but it's something for you to think about. And again, when we talk about capitalizing on AI, that gap is the human element, right? What is the cause? Why do these 2 things tend to happen together? AI won't tell you that, right? But when you think about what AI can do for your organization, you got to determine where you are in the continuum. If all you're doing is collecting data and cleaning it, you're not ready. You're not ready. The data is not clean enough for AI to use it effectively, right? And also at that point, the data collection is more of a cost center for your business than it is an asset. Where it really starts to build value is stage 3. right? How you can be more effective at using that data. And a lot of the difference between stage 2 and stage 3 is deciding what data is actually important, right? Like one of the examples that we discussed in this framework, there was an organization that was collecting like 400 different data elements on its customers, but no differentiation about which of those 400 different data elements was important, right? So, and AI doesn't know that, right? With limited resources, you want to have it focus on what do you think is most impactful, and then it's going to be able to do something with it, right? The other thing I would say is with these enterprise software, models for AI, there is a cost. It's more than $20 per user per month. So you want to make sure that that cost is going to take you from stage 2 to stage 3 before you make that investment. Okay. Suggesting actions to take to build stronger relationships. So remember, we talked about how one of those uniquely human skills is relationship building, right? So in this example, I'm having difficulty getting through to a stakeholder. I'm seeing a lot of resistance, and I want to figure out what tactics I can take that I haven't previously employed. And so this one I'm going to put into ChatGPT. Just going to copy and paste the same example. Okay. All right, let me pop over to ChatGPT. I'm going to show you guys a couple of things about ChatGPT also that I think are pretty cool. But here I am, I'm just pasting my question. It says, it sounds like you're facing common challenges in business development. Here are some strategies. Leverage success stories. Understand their hesitation. Offer a pilot program. Host an event. Involve industry influencers to get through to that decision maker. Enhance your value proposition. Request feedback. How can you get better? Right? So again, it's just giving me suggestions. So really what AI will help you do is think through some things, right? Especially if you're stuck. We were talking about it before, you have to sit down and write. How many of you guys have just sat staring at a blank screen because you don't know where to start? Ask AI your question, and it's going to give you a place to begin. It's not going to give you the perfect answer, but it'll give you a place to start, which often is the hardest part, right? And now, so while I'm on ChatGPT, I'm going to show you a couple of things here. I do not endorse any one of these more than the other, but just some things to point out here. So the first thing that I want to show you guys is you have this option here. So a couple of things. Down here, you can add a team workspace. So ChatGPT allows you to collaborate with other ChatGPT users. So I think the cost here is like $25 per user, but you can share GPT content together, right? And that's important because you can build GPTs that are specific to your use case, what you need it for, right? Something else that is available in ChatGPT and also in Copilot, because again, Copilot is built off the ChatGPT framework, is you can explore GPTs that other users have built, right? And there are a bunch of different categories that you can search in: writing, productivity, image generation, marketing. You can ask it for a specific example and see what comes up. Anybody have a use case you want to explore? You guys can give me one to search for. Recipes, okay. Cooking recipes, recipe wizard, and this is also vetted by other users. There's over 1,000 people who have used it and commented. This is generated by people like you, right? You gave the GPT specific instructions of what you wanted it to do. You saved it, and now you can export it for other people to use. There are thousands of them, all different types, right? There was one I saw, tattoo idea generator, right? Anything you can think of, it's probably out there. And this database is getting deeper and deeper every day, right? Now, you can also build your own GPTs. So right here, my GPT, I can create one. And I would give you an example that I didn't save for this, but let's say we're going to do a practice a little bit later on. Let's say I wanted to train a sales team, right? And so I want to give it a very specific set of parameters around what I want my sales team to do every single time, right? What I think is a good response, what I think is a bad response, who my typical customers are, and save it. GPT will then take on that persona, take that context, and your users can now interact with it and practice, right? And you can save it, you can export it, you can ask other people to join it, right? It will also save your context window. So let's say, for instance, I copy and pasted a document, my own document, and put it in there as its source material. Now it has become an expert in that document that I can engage with it, right? So, and this all comes with the GPT Pro version. You can save these different GPT models. So these features are newer. And again, Copilot can also do this for you. You can create your own GPTs, you can share them, you can collaborate as a team. So just an example I wanted to share there. And now, let's see. Identify patterns and provide basic summaries. So this is one that I think is cool, and we're going to do it live. Okay. So what I'm going to do now, this is the QCEW, so the Quarterly Census of Employment and Wages, right? I'm going to select my data table. Just scroll down a little bit. All right, so let's see. High-level industries, one area. Okay. Let's see, third quarter 2023. Let's see. Next. They're organized by state. Let's see. New York, Florida. Michigan, Minnesota. So what happens when you go live, right? So it's pulling it up right now. We're doing it together. Okay, getting closer. All right, here we go. Columbia County. This is a good one. Okay, let's get this table. Okay, so all I'm going to do here is I'm going to take the table, I'm going to copy and paste it into GPT, right? No special, skills here. So here, right there, simple copy and paste. So I'm taking this. Now, tab over. I'm back in Chat GPT. There we go. And I'm just pasting that entire table exactly the way it's formatted into the system. And it's telling me the high-level overview. Trends over time. It only covers 1 quarter, so it can't give me trends. But I'm going to ask it this question. What patterns do you see in the table above? Several patterns. Sectoral employment shifts, suggesting a seasonal fluctuation in employment. The dominance of the service sector. High specialization based on the location quotient. Education and health sectors have high concentration of employment. So it can take the data and give me its own interpretation. And all I did was copy and paste, right? If you want to get really fancy with it, you can add plugins that'll take those and turn it into a graphical representation, right? I didn't do that here, but you could easily do it, right? And so now, and again, all I did was copy and paste. I don't have any programming skills. I don't have any coding language. Another important use case is staff training, right? So what is an example of a role that one of your organizations would typically train for? Anybody? I'm sure we train employees, right? Scheduler? Scheduling for transportation? Okay. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna go back to ChatGPT. I just asked it, can you develop a training plan for an admin assistant with a focus on calendar management? Customer service, okay, we'll do that one next. So here is my week by week training breakdown of how I would train this admin. With the learning objectives and the different activities I want to use. Right, I did one yesterday for a warehousing supervisor. What would I train?
This is interesting. One of our programs we offer is on-the-job training program, which is a reimbursement back to businesses for training.
Yep.
Yeah. Many of the businesses are like, I don't have a training outline. I don't know why. I just know they need to know all these things.
Yep.
This is the tool.
Not only that, I can say, can you provide resources I can use to complement this training? LinkedIn Learning, online courses. Coursera, video tutorials. Articles. Books. Software tools and apps. Forums and communities. That took us 2 minutes. I have another one. Can I get a volunteer to do a role play with the ChatGPT? If I don't get one, I'm gonna ask Chris to do it, so.
I'll do it.
Okay. So Chris, what I'm gonna do, thank you for, we have a volunteer?
You want me to come over there? You buy the mic.
Yeah, come over here. I'm gonna set up a GPT prompt for you. I'm gonna turn my speaker on. All right, so what I'm using now is the ChatGPT app, okay? It allows me to just speak to it and it's gonna talk back to me conversationally, right? Hi, I'd like to practice my business services selling skills. Will you role play with me?
Of course, I'd be happy to role play with you. Just to clarify, are you selling a specific type of business service, or should we keep it general for now?
Yes, I sell medical devices to healthcare systems.
Got it.
Okay.
Let's say I'm a decision maker at a large healthcare system. You can start your pitch whenever you're ready.
Hi, my name's Chris. I'm calling from ABC Healthcare Solutions. I'd like to talk to a decision maker so that we can potentially become your new healthcare service provider.
Hi, Chris. This is Taylor. I oversee procurement and partnerships for our healthcare system. I'm curious about what ABC Healthcare Solutions offers. How can your services benefit our operations?
We provide a variety of healthcare solutions and healthcare related products. I'm not in the healthcare industry, right? Uh, we also sell X-ray machines. Would you be interested in buying an X-ray machine?
It's great to hear about the range of solutions and products you offer, including X-ray machines. Could you tell me more about the features and benefits of your X-ray machines? How do they stand out from what we might already be using?
Our X-ray machines here at ABC Healthcare Solutions, they have high definition images of bones and other things that are inside the body that you're not going to get from anyone else. Thank you.
Okay, can we stop the role play, but can you give me some feedback on how you think that went and what I can improve? Thank you.
Sure, let's go over some feedback. 1, introduction. Your introduction was clear and to the point, which is great. 2, product knowledge. You mentioned that your company provides a variety of healthcare solutions and products, including X-ray machines. 3, engaging the prospect. When you asked if I would be interested in buying an X-ray machine, it was a good attempt to gauge interest. However, it might be more effective to ask questions about the current challenges or needs of the healthcare system first. Expanding on how this feature translates into benefits for the healthcare system, like improved diagnostic accuracy or better patient outcomes, could strengthen your pitch. 5, adaptability. When the conversation shifted slightly, you adapted and continued to provide information, which is a good skill. Being flexible and able to steer the conversation back to key points is important. Overall, you're on the right track.
Thank you. So we did not script that before. That was totally live. Chris did not know I was going to do that.
Would you be able to dial down the grade level to say grade 9 or 10?
Yeah. You can ask it, again, you can set the criteria of how you want it to respond. I can ask it to, I could take, for instance, a contract or legal document and ask it to explain me the provisions as if I was 5 years old. Right? So you can cater your response however you would like it. I could ask it to respond in rhyme, right? It's very, very strong in terms of its ability to navigate language. Okay? So those are just a couple of examples. And, I think the goal really is to expose you guys to some of these tools. And my recommendation to everybody is that you go and play with them, right? It's developing comfort and just, an exposure to them is going to make them much more accessible to you. And you can think through the different use cases that might be relevant to your organization. But where you start is like, where could you save time? Where could you reduce mental load, right? Again, don't waste time scripting those emails. Have it come up with a prompt that you just edit, right? And do it in a fraction of the time. And so I did want to take a couple of minutes here. Thinking about the future of AI, there are a couple of things that we want to consider, right? I think one of the most important things about AI is that how do you kind of establish guardrails for it? It's a huge tool. It's incredibly powerful, but like any tool, it could be misused, right? And so how do you establish guardrails for it? And how do you make sure that it's reflective of the communities that we serve? I'll give you an example. Years ago, Google came up with Google Photos, and it used artificial intelligence to automatically categorize your pictures, right? So it would move baby photos to one side or pictures of the beach over, because it was basically reading the pictures. And one of the big snafus with Google is it categorized pictures of African-American people as animals. Now, this wasn't the AI being malicious, right? What Google found was that it didn't expose its AI to enough people of color. So the system just didn't know what to do with those pictures, and it did what it thought was the next best thing, right? And so I think one of the challenges with any of these tools is, who do we have in the development community that is articulating where it's going, right? And how do we make sure that that community is representative? And, we talked about those individuals who, maybe have low educational attainment, have limited technical literacy. If they're not engaging with these tools, they're not building the knowledge base, right? It's not going to see that community reflected back in its responses. So I think it's our responsibility to make sure that the people engaging with these tools is as diverse as we can make it, so that it's more reflective of our actual population. I think also when we think about the future of AI, and Danielle had asked a question around, individuals with impairments, it is a double-edged sword, right? It provides opportunities for accessibility, right? It can read visual media. So if you're visually impaired, it could take an image or a video or even live video and translate back what it's seeing, right? So that it makes it much more accessible. It could help individuals with mobility issues, right? You have these machines that can do a lot of the things that someone who had a mobility challenge wouldn't necessarily be able to do. It can only do those things if we're thoughtful about them in advance, right? Making sure that these, communities that are building and designing these systems are considering that population as well, right? And I think the tricky thing about AI is, if you were teaching the strongest intelligence in the world, who's best positioned to teach it? How do we make sure that it avoids learning our bad habits, right? What it's reflecting back to us in the content of the internet is what's on the internet. And there's a lot of stuff on the internet that I wouldn't say we would be proud of. So again, how do we make sure that it's safe and inclusive? I think those are one of the big priorities with AI.
I guess one of the other questions I had, you mentioned search engine optimization, right? And how Google something now, your search results are manipulated.
Yep.
Based on how companies who do this for a living. Can AI, I'm guessing AI will eventually be manipulated just like search engine.
Yeah. With any technology, and I think this is kind of the fun part about it, as soon as it's developed, people try to break it, right? People try to use it for a use that was not intended for, but that also helps make it more resilient, right? It makes it stronger. And again, these guardrails are important because it can be misused, right? And so just like we talked about before, you should not take anything that's generated at face value, right? You always have to qualify it. You always have to check your sources. You got to confirm that you're getting what you want back, because it's getting stronger and stronger. And we want to redirect it as we can if it's giving us the results that we don't want, right? Yes.
Like if you're, I kind of sort of placing job that like it's like that sense you have to send them so that like how do you?
That's a very good question. So, and I'm glad you brought that up. What I would not do in any of these platforms is put in any sensitive information, Now, most enterprise AI platforms, they restrict your information from being included in the training database. So I don't know if you noticed when I was in Copilot, because I was in my work account, it's part of my enterprise software license. It does not include my chats and content into the training database. All of the free versions take anything you put into it and include it into the training archive, because that content is designed to make it stronger. So I wouldn't include anything in any of these things that was in any way sensitive, right? That's just my advice. And so the question for my online friends is, how do you avoid, what do you do with sensitive information? Don't put it into AI. It's my recommendation.
Okay, this is all new to me, okay? I'm just wondering if AI allows like other software like PDF and PowerPoint, like tables, right? So if I wanted to come up with a PowerPoint and give AI the information that I want in that PowerPoint and include videos and tables, is that possible?
It totally is possible. In fact, Microsoft Copilot is designed to integrate with all of the Microsoft Office suite. So PowerPoint, Word, OneNote, it can connect to all of those things. And through ChatGPT, there's a plugin option where you can have it read PDF. So you can just give it a file. And like I mentioned, it's multimodal. So it can take almost any type of media and be able to digest it. We got a question in the back, Danielle?
So it's not a question, or maybe it is, but it's more so, it's almost like a call to action for all of us. I worry about the marginalized populations. That was what I was thinking the entire time you were doing this presentation. How are we going to let people learn or know what they don't know. You know, we're a relatively educated population of folks sitting here. And if we wanted to run a GPT query, we would have some semblance of, you know, what we could put in. But try folks that are incarcerated and are going to be released into the workforce who have not played with this type of technology, much less any technology. How are we going to prepare them so that they understand that this has an impact on the jobs that they were expecting to get when they were released? So no longer is the Wendy's drive-through going to be what you once thought it was. So that really impacts all of us as trainers. We have to be training folks differently and kind of eliminating that first tier and preparing folks for something bigger and better. In addition, how do I take this information now and communicate it to the people that I serve? You know, I'm not you, so I don't have your talents or your depth of knowledge, but I think all of us need to be, you know, prepared with this type of information. So now we can go out and share it with others. So anything you can do to share that with us, you know, would be much appreciated.
Sure. I mean, I think where I would start is where we started with this conversation is what is AI, right? Just starting really broadly there, letting people know that they have already engaged with it, whether they realize it's AI or not, right? Like one thing that we found in one of our programs in Pittsburgh, you know, we were doing a lot of hybrid services and connecting people through computers, and we thought that people were going to have a real challenge engaging with the service. But what we found is that one, everybody has a phone, everybody has a smartphone, and that also people were engaged in the internet because everybody was on Netflix and Hulu, right? So I think you start from the context that they understand, right? And then you start to build, well, this is what AI is, how you're currently using it, and what it might mean, right? And so, you know, I think everybody's going to come into this with a different capacity to understand, but I think it's exactly that, right? Let's think about the jobs that you're thinking of. And I think the other call to action is to reframe the way that we think about work to be skills first, right? Like this is the skill set that may not be around in the same way in 5 years. These are the skill sets, those uniquely human skills are the ones we want to emphasize. Where are your strengths here, developing those? Because those are much more resilient in this landscape, right? So, but I think that's the way we need to think about it. Less about like, I want this job, more, these are the skills that you're going to need, and these are the skills that are less relevant.
I am a workforce development professional in a higher education institution. How do I educate and prepare marginalized populations so that they understand the impact of AI on their future? The first time I entered that prompt, it couldn't answer. It just kept spinning.
Yep.
So then it said, retry. So I hit retry and it gave me 1.5 suggestions. So it started to give me, the first one is, let's see if I can read it. The first one says, oh, for heaven's sakes. It only gave me 1.5. The second one says community engagement, organized workshops, seminars, or community forums focused on AI. And then it says your most recent request failed. Please retry. So I didn't mean to stump Chat GPT, but I think the emotional intelligence piece of this is that there may not necessarily be a clear-cut answer to this, and that's where it's getting stumped.
Well, I think the other thing is for the free versions, there are limitations, right? So the ones that I was showing you is the paid version. It's a little bit faster and more accessible. And so, you know, the free version is going to have limits. The other thing is you're also limited to how many chats you can have in a specific time frame, because ChatGPT, we're not the only ones using it in this session, right? There's probably hundreds of thousands of people engaging on it all the time, and it has to digest that data somewhere. So for instance, I can only have 4 chats over a 3-hour period because it's taxing its servers to be able to respond. So that limitation is because of server traffic. But again, if you pay, you get more prominence in those servers.
I just have a question about sources and validating sources. If all of the users are at this time predominantly white, I'm assuming male, older, do the sources also skew towards that demographic? For example, would ChatGPT cite Fox News over Al Jazeera? Or does it depend entirely on the prompt?
It's going to depend more closely on the prompt and the prominence and relevance of those prompts terms in its search, right? I think probably more impactful than the sources is going to be who are developing the rules that it's operating by. And, the IT industry is, really homogenous, right? Like it is not hugely people of color, right? Not that many women, definitely not that many women of color. And so, I think that's one of the things when we talk about those guardrails is making sure that somebody's at the table to make sure that those populations are represented and that the response you're getting back is representative. I can hang out for questions. I know we're over time. I don't know if we have any questions in the chat.
So we started the conversation talking about the careers that and industries that this isn't not ready for yet, those that involve humans. I'm thinking healthcare, I'm thinking apprenticeship programs, I'm thinking like where do you see the future of that? And are we at a point now where we should be preparing industries that this isn't really prime time for 3 or 5 years from now?
Yes, everybody, like I mentioned, probably 90% of jobs are going to have some type of impact. It's the depth of impact, right? So, and the other thing is, again, when we talk about the capabilities, that reversing telescope in 5 years, some of those uniquely human skills will no longer be uniquely human, right? And so we do have to be thinking about what the implications might be and that concept of future proofing. So, I think one of the recommendations from that Jobs for the Future AI kind of blueprint is to constantly be rehashing those uniquely human skills, right? And to establish a framework where you're putting those through the filter regularly, right? Because again, as the technology becomes more capable, that window of uniquely human skills shrinks and shrinks and shrinks, right? And you don't want to start that conversation when it's on the horizon, right? Like you've got to develop that kind of acumen to understand where it might be going with every new implementation. Any other questions?
There were 2 questions in the chat. Are there any of the free or trial versions that would include the audio version?
So the app is free. What I just did is just the ChatGPT app. The Copilot app exists. The Gemini app exists. If you go wherever your phone has a app store, you can download it and you can do the free version. The language, the talking is free. You don't need to pay anything for the app.
And one more question. I think you hit on this a little bit, Buzz. Will AI help or hinder DEI efforts and close or widen gaps?
It could be both. I think, again, what we're seeing now is people are flagging where there is lack of representation much more quickly, right? I think there is more of kind of an attentiveness to that, and people are looking for it, right? They're testing these tools to see, is it representative? Is it inclusive? I think where it may widen gaps is if we're not thoughtful about the community that it's going to impact and preparing that community, right? And so, we mentioned that call to action. All of this is human-led, right? Like it's on us to advocate for those guardrails, right? And to make sure that we're thinking about these things. Because like I mentioned, the impact of AI is disproportionate, right? Disproportionately impacts women, right? Almost, I don't know if you guys remember what was happening with unemployment rates after COVID, right? It disproportionately impacted women of color, right? It's not that different. Those are the most vulnerable jobs to any disruption. And so if we know that, we have to be much more intentional about creating a space for that. Any other questions?
Oh, all right. So I don't see any questions in the chat and there's no questions in the room. So thank you, Richard, and thank you everyone in the room. And thank you everyone on Zoom for taking the time to meet with us today.